We all know work, right? I mean, that daily grind, the alarm clock, but also, chasing those bigger career goals, it really does shape so much of our lives.
It absolutely does.
But have you ever really stopped to think, like, how much your work environment affects your mental well-being?
It's profound, really.
Yeah, so today we're doing a deep dive into exactly that. We're pulling insights straight from a key World Health Organization document. It's called Mental Health at Work.
A really important one.
Definitely. And our mission, really, for you listening, is to unpack what makes a workplace, well, healthy or unhealthy for our minds.
Yeah.
And maybe more importantly, what concrete steps can actually be taken.
And if you're wondering just how big a deal this is globally, well, this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay?
Back in 2019, the WHO estimated that something like 15% of all working age adults worldwide had a mental disorder.
15%. Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge. Like nearly 1 in 6 people.
Exactly. 1 in 6. Think about your colleagues, your team. It's not some abstract number. These are people we know, people we work with, facing real challenges.
That really does put it into perspective. And the economic side, I imagine that's pretty staggering too.
Oh, it is. We're looking at an estimated 12 billion working days lost every single year, mostly due to depression and anxiety.
12 billion days.
Yeah, and that translates globally to a cost of about $1 trillion per year. Lost productivity.
$1 trillion. Okay, so this isn't just, a health issue. It's a massive economic issue too.
It affects everyone, absolutely. But here's something fascinating and maybe a bit counterintuitive that the WHO document really highlights.
Go on.
It's this paradox. Okay, let's unpack this. Decent work, good work, is actually good for your mental health.
Right, okay. Good for mental health. I think that might surprise some people listening, especially if they're feeling, burnt out. What makes it good? Is it just about the money?
The money's important, of course. The livelihood aspect is fundamental. But decent work gives you so much more than that.
Like what?
Well, it builds a sense of confidence, purpose, that feeling of achievement, when you nail a project or help the team succeed.
Yeah, okay, I get that.
It also provides chances for positive relationships, connections with colleagues, feeling included in a community, and something often overlooked, structure. Regular routines, that can be incredibly stabilizing.
So it's about feeling valued, connected, having that sense of direction, almost like work becomes part of who you are, your well-being, not just how you pay the bills.
Precisely. And, this positive side, it's even more critical for people who are already living with mental health conditions.
So,
For them, decent work can be a really powerful part of recovery. It helps with inclusion, boosts confidence, improves social functioning. It's a pathway back, a sense of normalcy.
And if you think about it from the organization's perspective, creating these safe and healthy environments, it's not just the right thing to do, is it?
Not at all. I mean, yes, it's a fundamental right, but it directly impacts the bottom line.
Right. Less tension, less conflict.
Better staff retention, definitely. People stick around where they feel supported. And better performance, better productivity overall. It's genuinely a win-win.
Okay, so that's the positive side. But that brings us to the flip side, doesn't it? The darker side. What happens when work environments aren't decent?
Right. This is where the WHO talks about psychosocial risks. That sounds a bit technical, but basically, these are things at work that can actively harm your mental health.
Okay.
They can relate to the job content itself, your schedule, the workplace culture, even career development or lack thereof.
So things like that feeling of being totally underused, your skills wasted, or the opposite, being completely overwhelmed by workload. Those aren't just bad days.
Exactly. The WHO identifies those as specific risks. Or think about working long, unsocial, inflexible hours, that constant disruption.
Or having no control, like over how you do your job or what your workload is.
Yes, lack of control is huge. Unsafe, or just poor physical conditions too. And critically, the organizational culture.
What do you mean by that?
Like a culture where there's a very limited support, maybe really authoritarian bosses, basically an environment that allows negative stuff to happen.
Yeah, like actual violence or harassment, bullying. Those things are still sadly common. Discrimination, exclusion.
All major risks. And sometimes it's subtler things too, like having a really unclear job role. That uncertainty creates massive stress.
Or being promoted without enough support, either under or over promoted, just feeling completely out of your depth.
Absolutely. And then there are the more structural things. Job insecurity, pay that just isn't adequate, not investing in people's careers.
And the classic struggle, right? Conflicting demands between home and work, trying to juggle everything.
That's a big one, too. It's quite a list when you lay it all out. And what's striking is how many of these feel, well, familiar to so many people. They're often dismissed as just part of the job.
But they're actually harmful. Recognize risks. It really drives home how widespread this is. And are some groups more vulnerable than others?
Yes, this source definitely points that out. Think about the informal economy that's over half the global workforce.
Over half.
Yeah. And these workers often lack basic regulatory protection. They work incredibly long hours, have little social or financial safety nets. It all adds up to higher mental health risks.
Okay.
Then you have specific professions like health workers, humanitarian aid workers, emergency responders. They face elevated risks just due to the nature of their work, exposure to trauma.
Makes sense.
And on a bigger scale, things like economic recessions, major emergencies, they trigger job losses, financial instability, and the source is very clear. These are risk factors for suicide attempts.
That's incredibly serious. And it also mentions work can kind of amplify existing societal problems.
Yeah, exactly. Discrimination and inequality based on race, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, social background, migrant status, religion, age. All these wider societal biases can play out really intensely in the workplace, impacting mental health.
It's like a microcosm.
It can be. And it's crucial to remember, too, just being out of work is a major risk factor itself.
Right.
Unemployment, job insecurity, financial instability, losing your job recently, these are all directly linked to increased risk of suicide attempts. Not having work can be as damaging as being in a toxic job.
Okay, so that's a pretty sobering picture of the risks. But the good news, I hope, is that this isn't just about listing problems. The WHO document offers solutions, right?
Absolutely. It lays out a really comprehensive blueprint for change.
Okay.
And it stresses that this isn't just on employers. Governments, worker organizations, other stakeholders, everyone has a role to play.
Right, a collective effort.
And they break it down into 4 key areas for action. Think of them as pillars.
Okay, 4 pillars, what are they?
So, first, prevent work-related mental health conditions from starting in the first place. Second, protect and promote mental health for everyone at work.
Proactive steps.
Exactly. Third, support workers who already have mental health conditions, help them participate fully and thrive. And fourth, create an enabling environment where all this change can actually take root.
That last one sounds important, making it stick. And you mentioned participation.
Yes, this is critical. The WHO emphasizes that any action needs meaningful input from workers themselves, their representatives, and crucially, people with lived experience of mental health conditions. It can't just be top-down.
Right, gotta involve the people it affects most. Okay, so let's look at that first pillar, prevention. How do we actually prevent these conditions?
Well, the focus here is directly tackling the psychosocial risks we talked about right there in the workplace.
Okay.
The WHO recommends what they call organizational intervention.
Organizational intervention. So that means changing the system, not just telling individuals to, manage stress better.
Precisely. It's about systemic change. These are actions that assess the risks and then actually mitigate them, modify them, or if possible, remove them entirely.
Can you give an example? What does that look like?
Sure. Things like implementing genuinely flexible working arrangements that can hugely reduce stress, improve work-life balance, or establishing really clear, robust frameworks for dealing with violence and harassment, making it clear it won't be tolerated and there are procedures.
So changing the structures, the policies, the culture itself.
Exactly. It's about fixing the environment, not just the individual.
Okay, that makes sense. So once we're working on prevention, what's next? You mentioned pillar 2, protecting and promoting mental health.
Right, so this is more proactive. It's about building capacity, especially for people in charge, like managers and supervisors, so they can recognize mental health issues and know how to act supportively.
So training for managers.
Yes, that's a key recommendation. Manager training helps them spot signs of emotional distress, builds essential skills like, open communication, active listening.
Things that build trust.
Absolutely. And it helps them understand how job stressors actually impact mental health. It empowers them to be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
So equipping leaders with empathy and practical skills, not just task management.
Precisely. The WHO also recommends training for all workers.
Oh, for everyone.
Yeah, to improve overall mental health literacy, just helping everyone understand it better, recognize signs in themselves and others, know where to go for help. This is huge for reducing stigma, too.
Yeah, making it okay to talk about.
Definitely. And finally, under this pillar, there are individual interventions. These are things that help workers build their own skills for managing stress, reducing symptoms, like psychosocial support programs, or even just providing opportunities for leisure-based physical activity.
Right, supporting individual coping mechanisms, too. Okay, that leads us to Pillar 3, supporting workers who do have mental health conditions.
Yes. And the document really reinforces their right to participate fully and fairly in work. This aligns with big human rights frameworks, like the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It's about non-discrimination.
So how do we ensure that happens in practice?
The WHO recommends 3 main interventions here. First, providing reasonable accommodations.
Reasonable accommodations. What does that mean day to day?
It means adapting the work environment to fit the individual's needs. It could be offering flexible hours, maybe giving extra time for certain tasks, modifying assignments to be less stressful, allowing time off for therapy or appointments, or even just having regular supportive check-ins with a manager.
So tailoring the job or the environment so someone can actually perform it well despite their condition, making work accessible.
Exactly. It ensures people aren't unfairly disadvantaged. Second, they recommend return-to-work programs.
For people coming back after an absence.
Yes. These combine work-focused support, like maybe a phased return, gradually increasing hours or duties with ongoing clinical care. The aim is a sustainable, meaningful return to work, while also managing symptoms and preventing relapse.
That sounds really practical.
It is. And third, there are supported employment initiatives. These are more targeted programs, often for people with more severe mental health conditions. They provide ongoing mental health and vocational support to help people find and, crucially, keep paid employment. It's about long-term integration and support.
Okay, prevention, protection, promotion, support. What's the fourth pillar?
The fourth one is creating an enabling environment for change. This is the big picture stuff. It's about broader systemic changes driven by governments and employers working together with all the stakeholders.
So making sure the whole system supports mental health at work.
Exactly. It involves strengthening things across 7 key areas.
7 areas. Okay, let's hear them.
First, strong leadership and commitment. You need leaders at all levels, government and business, integrating mental health into policies. Second, investment. Putting actual budgets behind this, making sure support is available, even for smaller businesses that might struggle for resources.
Money talks. Right, what else?
Third, upholding rights, making sure employment laws line up with international human rights standards, implementing clear non-discrimination policies. Fourth, integration.
Integration.
Yeah, embedding mental health support within existing occupational safety and health systems. So it's not just some separate add-on, it's part of the core safety culture.
Got it. Makes it mainstream.
Fifth, participation. We touched on this, ensuring meaningful, ongoing consultation with workers, their unions or reps, and people with lived experience. Their voice has to be central.
Makes sense. What are the last 2?
Sixth is basing everything on evidence, making sure all the guidance, all the actions are grounded in the latest research and data on what actually works.
So no guesswork.
Right. And finally, seventh is compliance. Integrating mental health into the duties of national labor inspectorates, the bodies that enforce workplace laws. Making sure these standards are actually being met.
So real accountability.
Exactly. It closes the loop, ensures intention translates to action.
Wow. Okay, that's a really thorough framework. What a deep dive this has been. We've covered how work can be both, a source of well-being and a source of harm for our mental health.
That dual nature is key.
Yeah, and how fixing it isn't simple. It needs this multifaceted approach involving governments, employers, workers, everyone. It really hammers home that dealing with mental health at work isn't just like a nice to have.
Not at all. It's fundamental. It's about productivity, sure, keeping good staff, absolutely, but it's also just a basic human right.
And the WHO is clearly pushing hard on this.
Oh, definitely. It's a major focus. There are big strategies like the Comprehensive Mental Health Action Plan and the World Mental Health Report. They both pinpoint the workplace as a critical place for making real change.
And they provide tools to help.
Yes, they have practical guidelines, and there's a policy brief they did with the International Labor Organization, the ILO. These are tools designed to help governments and employers actually implement these recommendations on the ground.
So there's a roadmap out there for anyone wanting to make a difference. That's good to know. Well, as we wrap up, maybe something for you, our listener, to think about.
Mm.
Just consider for a moment how deeply tangled up mental health really is with the whole fabric of our working lives. And maybe ask yourself, what small but meaningful change, maybe inspired by something we've talked about today, could start to shift the culture in your workplace towards better well-being for everyone?